Hey guys, welcome back to another video. And today we're gonna tackle the question, is food addiction a real thing? Now, I believe that food addiction is certainly a real thing. If you think you have food addiction, you will have some symptoms that interfere with your life. Now, food is a substance, right? We generally associate addictions with drugs or alcohol, but food is also a substance. So when we talk about food addictions, we have to understand what's going on in our brain, like what's happening. And food addiction is a real thing just because in research, the mechanisms that drive drug addiction are so similar to the mechanisms that drive food addiction. If you take rats, right, in the lab, and if you give them high calorie food for 24 hours for an extended long period of time, they will get obese. How they test food addiction is by examining their brain. So they'll kill some rats and they will examine their brains through various lab techniques. And one of them is Western blot. They'll see all the expressions of certain proteins that are expressed or not expressed. Other techniques are PCR. PCR is basically looks at the genetic component of the brain. Genetic component meaning DNA, RNA. They compared those brains, the obese brains, to the normal brains. And interestingly, they found there was a reduction in dopamine receptors in the brain. And when you have a reduction of dopamine receptors in the brain, when there's a high release of dopamine, that those dopamine molecules, chemicals, cannot bind to the receptors in a large number as compared to normal individuals who had healthy levels of receptors. So basically what's happening here is when you have, if you eat like a really high calorie food, like let's just say good food, like juicy, saucy, and so that there will be a large dopamine release. Over time, what happens is the receptors are not there. And so basically dopamine binds to its receptors, right? And so if dopamine binds to those receptors and there reduction of those receptors, dopamine cannot bind. And when dopamine cannot bind, we cannot feel the pleasure. So we eat more. And what is this then? This is similar to drug addiction. If you cannot get the reward, psychological reward from a particular food, you will eat more of that food to get that perceived reward. The biological mechanism behind this is you get a large release of dopamine, you get reduction of receptors, and so dopamine has nowhere to bind. It has place, but the places where dopamine can bind or dock itself, they're less. And when you have less binding of dopamine, you have less psychological pleasure. And also dopamine, I know dopamine is not associated with pleasure, but the final result is not feeling pleasure. This is very similar to drug addiction. People love brain scans, right? So I looked up what obese brain looks like and what a normal healthy brain looks like. And when you compare, now this is in humans, not in rats. When you compare the two brains, the obese brain had reduction in the dopamine receptors, so less places the dopamine could bind. And also you have activation in the reward system in obese individuals in resting state higher than normal individuals. Let's say two people are walking side by side. One is obese and one is normal. The obese individual has more activation in the reward circuit compared to the normal. And so why is that? The obese brain has been trained for a long period of time to gain more food, to match the levels of psychological pleasure. This is the biological mechanism, and it's so close to drug addiction. It's so scary, and I no doubt the U.S. has the highest obese individuals in the world right now. Because you look at our food, look at our food. We're living in abundance. There's hyperstimulation of our brain in every aspect of our lives, and so it's changing our brain. It's evolving our brain. It's dysregulating our reward circuit, our dopamine circuit. Anything in excess will dysregulate your brain circuits. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope this was really informational. And I really get excited talking about the brain and how our relationship to things affect our brain. And so hopefully I'll pump out more videos like this. The only goal of posting these videos is to make life better. And remember that most people can solve their own problems, and so can you.